Not $320. Not a dealership appointment. Not a subscription service or a proprietary formula locked behind a counter. Under $8. That is the full cost of what Japanese taxi fleets quietly used for decades, while Western drivers handed mechanics a month's worth of grocery money to perform the same task in 20 minutes with a spray bottle and a straight face. The improvement is documented. 12 to 18% better fuel economy. Engines running past 400,000 kilometers without major fuel system intervention. A cold start that catches clean. A throttle response that sharpens. A combustion cycle burning fuel the way engineers originally intended before carbon and complacency fouled the equation. The method is not patented. It is not exclusive. It is not complicated. And it was discovered not in a laboratory with million-dollar equipment, but in a fuel depot in Japan in 1973 by mechanics who had no choice but to find a cheaper way to survive, and who found something the industry has spent 50 years pretending does not exist. To understand why your dealer charges $320 for this, you have to go back to 1970s Japan and a fuel crisis that changed everything except what they taught you. October 1973, the Arab oil embargo hits Japan harder than almost any industrialized nation. Japan imports more than 90% of its oil. Overnight, fuel prices spike. Taxi companies in Tokyo and Osaka, running hundreds of vehicles per fleet, logging hundreds of kilometers per day, cannot absorb the cost. They cannot pass all of it to passengers. They cannot park the cars, so they do the only thing left. They experiment. Fleet mechanics, working without corporate oversight or manufacturer approval, begin testing additives in fuel tanks. Small measured doses. Kerosene compounds, solvents already sitting on depot shelves, and one compound added at carefully tracked ratios begins producing consistent documented results across multiple vehicle types. A 14 to 17% reduction in fuel consumption per kilometer driven. The records exist. Ministry of Transport fleet efficiency tracking from 1974 through 1978 shows the pattern across hundreds of logged vehicles running daily commercial routes. Taxi company maintenance logs, cross-referenced against fuel purchase records, confirm what the mechanics already knew in their hands. The method worked, it was cheap, and it cost the industry nothing, which is exactly why the industry refused to acknowledge it. The Western automakers received the data indirectly. Trade publications carried fragments of it. Engineers at American and European firms saw the numbers, and then the numbers disappeared from official channels because the numbers threatened something far more valuable than fuel efficiency: the service revenue model that had already begun taking shape in dealership back offices across the United States and Europe. That is twist one. A fuel shortage handed mechanics the cheapest fuel economy solution in automotive history. The industry picked it up, looked at it, and handed it back, with a $320 price tag attached. The chemistry behind what those Tokyo mechanics discovered is not folkloric. It is not pseudoscience promoted by internet conspiracy boards. It is basic combustion physics. Acetone, the same compound found in hardware store solvent cans for roughly $6 a quart, reduces the surface tension of gasoline. Lower surface tension means the fuel atomizes more finely as it enters the combustion chamber. Droplet size drops from approximately 200 microns under standard conditions to closer to 80 microns with the additive present. Smaller droplets mean greater surface area exposed to oxygen. Greater surface area means more complete combustion per ignition cycle. More complete combustion means more energy extracted per gallon, and fewer unburned hydrocarbon deposits coating injector tips, intake valves, and combustion chamber walls. This is not a fringe theory. Combustion droplet size and its relationship to fuel efficiency appears throughout automotive engineering literature going back decades. In the early 2000s, an independent American researcher named Louis Lapointe conducted a documented road test spanning more than 100,000 miles across multiple vehicle types, using 2.5 ounces of acetone per 10 gallons of fuel as his working ratio, and recorded average fuel economy improvements of 14 to 15%. Lapointe's documentation circulated through early internet automotive forums starting around 2004. The mainstream automotive press never covered it. Trade publications that depended on additive company advertising revenue stayed silent. The Society of Automotive Engineers had published technical papers on fuel atomization and additive effects on combustion efficiency throughout the 1980s. The science was available. The application was obvious. The industry looked directly at both and chose not to mention them because the moment a driver knows that a $6 bottle of hardware store acetone performs the core function of a $320 dealer dealer service, the service disappears. The suppression did not require a conspiracy meeting in a boardroom. It required only money flowing in the right direction. Through the 1980s and into the 1990s, the US aftermarket fuel additive industry built itself into a market generating more than $2 billion annually by repackaging commodity compounds, many of them chemically similar or identical to what depot mechanics in Osaka had been using since the oil shock, inside proprietary bottles with technical sounding names and aggressive retail placement. Companies like STP and Bardol and a dozen imitators did not invent new chemistry, they invented new packaging. The markup between raw compound cost and retail shelf price ran 40 to 80 times the base material cost. Safety data sheets, which federal law requires manufacturers to disclose, listed the active ingredients plainly for anyone willing to read them. Nobody read them, nobody was supposed to. The marketing budget existed precisely to make reading unnecessary. Walk into any auto parts store and count the bottles. Dozens of products, different colors, different fonts, different promises printed in bold across the label. Behind the label, the same category of compound, the same basic solvent action, the same fuel system cleaning mechanism that a Tokyo mechanic achieved with a hardware store purchase in 1973. The shelf space itself is the suppression, a wall of branded complexity built to make the simple answer invisible. Then the dealerships built the final layer of the structure. The fuel induction service emerged as a line item on service menus at dealerships across the United States sometime in the late 1990s and accelerated through the 2000s. The procedure itself takes 20 minutes. A service technician sprays a commercially purchased intake cleaner through the throttle body while the engine runs, then pours a bottle of fuel system cleaner into the tank. That is the complete procedure. The materials cost the dealership between $8 and $15 wholesale. The labor time is 20 minutes of intermittent attention. The customer charges $320, sometimes higher, billed at service intervals designed not around vehicle need, but around profit calendar. Consumer investigations into unnecessary upsell services have repeatedly flagged fuel induction services as among the highest markup, lowest necessity items on the standard dealership menu. Service advisors are trained not maliciously but systematically to recommend them at mileage triggers: 30,000 miles, 60,000 miles, regardless of vehicle condition, regardless of fuel quality used, regardless of whether any symptom exists. The service interval was not discovered by engineering, it was invented by accounting. And here is where Twist 2 lands like an invoice you did not ask for. While American dealers were charging $320 for this service, the Japanese automakers who built the cars being serviced were selling the equivalent maintenance product in their home market for approximately 800 yen, roughly $5 at any Japanese auto parts retailer. Toyota and Honda domestic service documentation, written for Japanese consumers, references periodic fuel system maintenance as a routine, inexpensive owner task. The same companies, the same cars, the same chemistry, different country, different price by a factor of more than 60. The gap between those two numbers is not explained by shipping costs or regulatory compliance. It is explained by what the market in each country has been taught to accept. Japanese consumers were taught that this was routine and cheap. American consumers were taught that it required a professional, a service bay, and a significant fee. The fleet data that sits behind this story is not theoretical. Tokyo taxi operators running coordinated maintenance protocols through the 1990s and into the 2000s, fleets logging kilometers at rates that would destroy an average consumer vehicle in 3 years, documented fuel system service intervals that stretched to between 380,000 and 420,000 kilometers before major intervention was required. Control fleets running standard Western-style maintenance schedules averaged closer to 180,000 kilometers before equivalent deterioration. The difference was not engine quality. The vehicles came off the same assembly lines. The difference was maintenance protocol, more specifically whether a small measured additive dose entered the fuel system regularly, keeping combustion chamber deposits from accumulating and injector spray patterns from degrading. That data never appeared in American automotive press. It was not featured in consumer reports. It did not make the service bulletin archive that dealership technicians reference when building maintenance schedules. It stayed in fleet logs written in Japanese, cross-referenced in trade documents that never crossed the Pacific into mainstream circulation, until independent mechanics and forum researchers began piecing the picture together one data point at a time. Think about what those numbers actually mean against real driving life. A fleet vehicle averaging 420,000 kilometers of clean combustion before its first major fuel system intervention, is the mechanical equivalent of driving from New York to Los Angeles more than 90 times without the engine ever developing the deposit buildup that a dealership service menu was designed to treat. The same engine, the same fuel, a different protocol costing under $20 a year to maintain. Now picture what that engine looks like inside at 420,000 kilometers versus one that never received the protocol. Crack the valve cover on the treated engine and the combustion chamber walls show a light, even carbon film. Normal residue from incomplete combustion cycles, manageable, thin. Crack the same cover on the untreated engine at half that mileage and you find thick, uneven carbon shelves built up around the intake valves. Injector tips varnished with baked fuel residue. Spray patterns degraded from a fine cone to an irregular drip. That is the deposit buildup that a $320 service is theoretically addressing. And the difference between the two engines is not the dealership. It is whether someone added 2.5 ounces of a $6 compound to the fuel tank on a regular schedule. The industry never wanted you to open that valve cover and make that comparison yourself. Now do the math that the dealership never does in front of you. Acetone at a hardware store costs approximately $6 per quart. At 2.5 ounces per 10-gallon fill-up, 1 quart treats roughly 40 tanks of fuel. Annual cost for a driver filling up once a week, approximately $20. Against a $320 dealer service recommended every 15,000 miles. Against a 15% fuel economy improvement on the average American driver's annual fuel spend of roughly $2,400. That is $360 saved in fuel cost alone every year permanently. The service pays for itself in days. The cheap version of the service, done correctly, outperforms the expensive version by one measure that matters. It is continuous. The dealer service happens once, at a mileage interval, and then the deposits begin accumulating again immediately. The additive protocol maintains a consistently clean combustion environment fill after fill. That is twist 3. The viewer is not being shown a hack. The viewer is being shown that the expensive service was always the inferior version of the cheap one, and the industry knew it, and the service menu got printed anyway. Here is exactly what you do. Go to any hardware store, buy 100% pure acetone, not nail polish remover with additives, not a blended solvent, pure acetone, available for approximately $6 a quart. Before your next fill up, pour 2.5 ounces into your empty tank, then fuel normally. The incoming gasoline mixes it completely during fill. Do this for your first 3 consecutive fill-ups to begin clearing existing deposits. After that, add a maintenance dose every 3rd fill-up. This works on gasoline engines, manufactured from roughly 1990 onward, when fuel system rubber seals and gaskets transitioned to acetone-compatible compounds. If your vehicle is pre-1990, verify seal material before using. Within 1 to 2 tanks, you will notice the change. Throttle response tightens, cold starts catch faster, fuel consumption numbers drop measurably. By 5,000 miles, a bore scope inspection of the combustion chamber will show the difference visually against an untreated baseline. If you own a $25 Bluetooth OBD2 scanner, watch your short-term and long-term fuel trim numbers across the first 3 tanks. A cleaner combustion cycle shows in the data. The engine management system stops compensating for inefficiency. The numbers correct themselves towards 0. That scanner readout is the same data the dealer charges you $320 to tell you they have addressed. You now have the address. The evidence has been accumulating for 50 years across multiple countries, multiple fleet types, multiple independent testers. Louis Lapointe drove more than 100,000 miles to document it. Japanese taxi fleets logged it in maintenance records that stretched engine life to distances Western service schedules never projected. Combustion engineers published the underlying physics and technical papers available to anyone with a library card or a journal subscription. Safety data sheets disclose the active ingredients on every bottle of overpriced fuel system cleaner sitting in every parts store in the country. The SAE published the atomization science. The fleet logs confirmed the mileage. The dealer invoice confirmed the markup. The SDS sheet confirmed the ingredient. Every layer of the story was always there, waiting to be read in sequence. This is not a hack. This is a verdict. The Japanese figured this out when the oil ran out and the depot shelves were the only resource left. They documented it quietly, used it systematically, and drove their fleets to distances that should have been impossible under standard Western maintenance logic. 50 years later, the dealer is still handing you a $320 invoice for the question. You are standing in your driveway now, a $6 bottle in your hand with the same answer.